girl lived in a small, broken-down house on the edge of the village. The walls were cracked, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the floor was uneven and dusty. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, her body aching from sleeping on the thin mat that had been her bed for years. Her life was quiet, too quiet for most people to notice. She didn't speak much, not because she didn't have words, but because speaking often brought her more trouble than comfort. The people around her seemed to misunderstand her, thinking her silence was stubbornness or weakness, when in reality, it was her way of protecting herself. She had learned early on that words could be used against her. Silence was safer. Her family treated her as if she didn't exist. Her stepmother often scolded her for things she had not done, and her stepbrother laughed at her mistakes, even when they were accidents. The girl learned to move carefully, to do her chores quickly and quietly, and to avoid eye contact when she could. Even when she worked hard in the kitchen, fetching water, cooking meals, or cleaning the small, dusty rooms, her efforts were barely acknowledged. Most of the time, she felt invisible, like a shadow moving through a house that was never hers. The girl had a small garden outside their house, few patches of vegetables that grew despite the poor soil. She took care of it quietly, talking softly to the plants when she thought no one was listening. She found some comfort in the tiny green leaves and the smell of the earth after rain. In those moments, she could imagine a different life, a life that was hers, where she was free to laugh, speak, and dream without fear. Every day followed the same routine. She woke before the sun, cleaned the house, carried water from the well, prepared breakfast for her family, and then ran errands in the village. She often went to the market to sell vegetables or to collect wood for fire, always careful to stay out of the way of people who might make fun of her or treat her harshly. On her way, she would watch other children play, wishing she could join them, but never daring to. Her silence and her poverty made her feel different. She had learned that being different was dangerous in this village. One day, something happened that shook her world. She was carrying a basket of vegetables to the market when she saw a man yelling at a woman in the street. The woman was frightened, backing away, but the man continued shouting and gesturing angrily. The girl froze, her heart racing. She wanted to turn away, but she couldn't. She had seen violence before, but seeing it so close made her feel a deep fear she couldn't ignore. She wanted to help, but she was just a small girl with no power. She stayed hidden behind a cart, watching as the situation escalated. The man grabbed the woman's arm roughly, and the girl knew she had to get out of the village before something worse happened to her or to anyone else she cared about that night. She lay on her thin mat, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her mind raced with thoughts she had never allowed herself to think before. She knew she could not stay. Every day had become more dangerous, more oppressive. Her silence, which had once protected her, could not save her from the anger and cruelty that seemed to surround her family and neighbors. She realized she had to leave, to escape to a place where no one knew her, a place where she could start over. The thought scared her, but the fear of staying was worse. She felt a strange mix of terror and hope. She didn't know where she would go or how she would survive, but she knew that staying was not an option. The next morning, she began to prepare. She packed a small bag with the few things she owned, a change of clothes, a small piece of bread, and a tin cup. She took her father's old coat, even though it was much too large for her, because it would keep her warm at night. She looked around the house one last time, seeing the cracks in the walls, the broken floor, and the small garden that she had cared for. She felt a pang of sadness, but she knew that leaving was necessary. She had to find a place where she could be safe and free, a place where her silence would not be mistaken for weakness. She left early, before the sun had risen, moving quietly so her family would not notice. She walked through the empty streets of the village, past the market stalls that were still closed, past the houses where people slept, unaware of her escape. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Every step she took was uncertain, but she also felt a strange sense of freedom. She was alone, but for the first time, she felt like her life might belong to her as she walked. She thought about the people she had seen in the city when she had visited with her family before. She remembered the tall buildings, the crowded streets, and the busy people who seemed to be in a hurry all the time. She did not know anyone there, but she hoped that someone would be kind, someone who would help her. She thought about the jobs she could try to do, the food she could earn, and the possibility of a place to sleep that was safe. The city seemed like a distant dream, but it was also her only hope. The journey was harder than she had imagined. She walked for hours, carrying her small bag, feeling the weight of exhaustion and hunger. Her feet were sore, and her stomach growled, but she kept moving. She hid during the day to avoid people who might see her, and she traveled mostly at night when the streets were quieter. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed dangerous. She had never felt so alone, yet she also felt a strange courage growing inside her. She had made a choice, and she would see it through. One night, she found a small abandoned shed where she could rest. She curled up in a corner, covering herself with her coat, and tried to sleep. The cold seeped through the thin fabric, and her stomach ached from hunger, but she closed her eyes and imagined a better life. She imagined a place where she could speak without fear, where she could be treated with kindness, and where she could belong. She imagined a life where she was seen and heard, not ignored or scolded. The thought gave her strength to continue. As the days passed, she learned to survive in ways she had never known. She begged for food when she had to, did small errands for people, and stayed hidden when she could. She learned to watch people carefully, to notice who was kind and who was cruel. Her silence, which had once been a burden, became her shield. She did not speak unless necessary, and she learned to read faces and gestures to understand people's intentions. She was growing stronger, wiser, and more aware of the dangers and opportunities in the world. Even in the midst of fear and hardship, she never gave up hope. She believed that her life could change, that there was a place where she could be safe and respected. She thought about the people who had been kind to her in the past, the small moments of warmth that reminded her that not everyone was cruel. She held on to those memories like a lifeline, believing that if she could survive, she could find a better future. By the end of the first week of her journey, she reached the outskirts of a large city. The tall buildings loomed over her, and the streets were crowded with people rushing in every direction. She felt overwhelmed, but also a sense of possibility. She had made it this far, against the odds, and she was determined to keep going. She found a quiet alley to rest in, and as she lay down, she felt a strange sense of pride. She had left her old life behind, faced danger, and survived on her own. For the first time, she felt like she had control over her own destiny. Even if it was just a small piece of it, her journey had only just begun. But she had taken the first, most important step. She had chosen to escape, to fight for her life, and to believe in the possibility of something better. The city was full of unknowns, full of dangers and challenges, but also full of hope. And the girl, silent and small, with nothing but courage and determination, was ready to face it all. The girl stepped into the city, feeling the rush of people around her. Every step seemed loud in her ears. People walked past, ignoring her, pushing carts, and talking on their phones. She felt both invisible and overwhelmed at the same time. She had never seen so many buildings, so many lights, and so many people in one place. Her stomach twisted with worry and excitement. This city was a place where she could disappear, but it could also swallow her whole if she was not careful. She had to find a way to survive. Even if she didn't know where to start, she walked down a busy street, her bag pressed tightly against her side. Every now and then she would peek into small shops or watch children playing in small parks. She longed to join them, but fear kept her silent and distant. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and she knew she needed food soon. She remembered the small bits of bread she had left in her bag. She tore them into tiny pieces and ate slowly, savoring every bite. Even though it was hardly enough, it gave her the energy to keep moving. As night began to fall, the streets changed. The bright lights of the city made shadows dance across the walls. The girl found a quiet alley where she could rest for a while. She sat against a brick wall, hugging her knees and listening to the sounds around her. The city never slept, and neither did its dangers. She heard footsteps echoing on the pavement and voices shouting in the distance. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had survived so far by being careful and quiet, and she would continue to do so. The days that followed were full of challenges. She had no money, no friends, and no place to sleep safely. She wandered the streets looking for odd jobs, anything that could give her food or a few coins. Sometimes people ignored her completely. Other times they shouted at her for being in the way, but she didn't let it stop her. She remembered why she had come here, to escape the danger and misery of her old life, to find a chance at something better. Every hardship made her more determined. She slept in abandoned corners, behind fences and in small parks when no one was around. She avoided people who looked threatening and kept her bag close at all times. Rain and cold nights were especially hard. She would shiver under her thin coat, imagining a warm bed and a safe roof. Hunger was constant, but she learned to ration whatever food she could find or earn. She begged politely from shopkeepers who seemed kind or picked up leftover food from bins. She felt ashamed at times, but survival mattered more than pride. She had to keep going. During the day, she observed the city carefully. She watched people to understand their habits, noticing who might help her and who could hurt her. She started helping elderly neighbors with small tasks in exchange for food. She swept floors, ran errands, or carried packages, always quietly and efficiently. Her silence, which had once made her invisible, now became an advantage. People didn't ask too many questions, and sometimes trusted her more because she did not talk much. It was not an easy life, but it was better than the one she had left behind. One afternoon, while delivering a package for a small store, she noticed a group of street children fighting over scraps of food. She felt a pang in her heart, remembering her own hunger and fear. She quietly stepped in, offering a piece of bread from her bag. The children looked surprised at first, but then accepted it. She did not say much, only smiling softly. Their eyes were filled with gratitude, and it made her feel a small warmth in her chest. Even in her own struggle, she could bring comfort to others. It reminded her that kindness could exist even in the harshest places. A few days later, she found herself near a large park filled with people enjoying the sun. She sat quietly under a tree, watching the families, workers, and children around her. She longed for a place where she could belong, where she could live without fear. She felt a strange loneliness in the midst of so many people. It was then that she realized that escaping the village had brought freedom, but it also brought isolation. She had to learn not only to survive, but to find someone or somewhere that could become her home, even if it was not a house. Her journey took a turn one evening when she helped an elderly man who had dropped his bag. She picked it up and handed it to him silently. The man looked at her with surprise and gratitude. He asked where she was staying, and she shook her head, too shy to answer. He smiled kindly and offered her a place to rest for the night. She hesitated but then accepted, feeling a sense of relief. That night, she slept on a proper mattress for the first time in weeks. The warmth of the room and the kindness of the man gave her hope. She realized that there were still good people in the city. People who could see her without judging her past. The next few weeks were about learning and adapting. She discovered the city had rules she did not know, dangers she had never imagined, and opportunities she had never dreamed of. She learned to navigate public transportation, find affordable food, and keep herself safe from people who might exploit her. Every day was a challenge, but she faced it with courage. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning how to live. Her confidence grew slowly, though she remained quiet and cautious. One morning, while collecting discarded papers for recycling, she noticed a tall, well-dressed man observing her. He was unlike anyone she had seen before. There was a sense of authority in the way he moved, and a curiosity in his eyes. He did not look at her as if she were invisible, but as if he could see something others could not. She felt a strange mix of fear and intrigue. She wanted to hide, but something in his gaze made her stay. She continued her work quietly, stealing glances at him from time to time. She did not know it yet, but this man would play a role in changing her life. The days went on. She kept her distance, watching him from afar. She noticed that he would occasionally look for her, not in a threatening way, but with interest. She did not understand why someone like him would care about someone like her. She was poor, silent, and struggling, while he was powerful and wealthy. Yet there was something in her that made him curious, something he could not ignore. She felt both nervous and hopeful. For the first time, she wondered if someone could care about her, not for what she could give, but for who she was. She continued to survive as she always had, quietly and cautiously. She earned small amounts of money, slept in safe corners, and kept herself hidden from the dangers of the city. But now, there was a new feeling inside her, a spark of hope. Perhaps this city, which had seemed so cold and unforgiving, could hold a chance for her. Perhaps there was a life beyond hunger, fear, and loneliness. Perhaps she could find someone who would see her, not as a poor, silent girl, but as a person capable of hope, courage, and kindness. One evening, as she returned to her small hiding place, she found a small package left for her. Inside was a loaf of bread and a note that simply said, "You are not invisible." Her heart raced. She did not know who had left it, but the words filled her with a strange warmth. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone might see her as more than just a shadow. She clutched the package to her chest, tears forming in her eyes, and whispered a silent thank you. Her journey had been long and hard. Moments like this made every step worth it. The girl's days continued with the same quiet determination. She had escaped her old life, survived the dangers of the city, and found small signs of kindness and hope. Each day, she became stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own courage. She knew that bigger challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that she had what it took to face them. She had survived the impossible before, and she could do it again. As she lay down to sleep that night, under the faint glow of a street lamp, she thought about the future. She did not know what it held, but she was ready. She had left her village, faced hunger and fear, learned to navigate a city that was indifferent at best and dangerous at worst. She had discovered that even in darkness there were small lights of hope, and she had learned to find them. She was still silent, still cautious, but she was also alive, determined and ready to face whatever came next. Her escape had led her here to the edge of a new life, and she would not turn back. The city had become both her home and her battlefield. Every day was a careful balancing act between survival and hope. She had grown accustomed to the noise, the crowd, and the constant rush of people who seemed too busy to notice anything beyond their own lives. She wandered streets that were lined with shops, cafes, and towering buildings that reached high into the sky. She had learned where to find cheap food, quiet corners to rest, and friendly faces who offered small acts of kindness without expecting much in return. Yet she remained invisible in many ways, quiet and cautious, always aware of how fragile her existence was in this bustling city. One day, while delivering a small package for a local shop, she noticed a commotion near a busy intersection. A well-dressed man appeared to be in trouble, arguing with a street vendor over something that seemed minor, but had escalated quickly. The vendor was shouting, waving his hands, and a crowd was beginning to gather. The girl instinctively moved closer, her curiosity mixed with fear. She saw the man trying to calm the situation, but his presence alone seemed to intimidate the vendor. Something about the way he carried himself, the confidence in his voice and stance, caught her attention. She watched quietly from a distance, careful not to be seen. Yet drawn to the intensity of the moment, the man eventually resolved the dispute. Paying the vendor and walking away without showing anger or frustration, the crowd dispersed, and he moved toward a nearby office building. The girl lingered, feeling a strange pull toward him. She had never encountered anyone who seemed so commanding, yet so composed and calm. She did not know why, but a part of her wanted to follow, to understand more about him, even though her survival instincts told her to stay hidden. She waited, keeping her distance, observing him as he entered the building. Something inside her told her that this man would play a role in the next chapter of her life. Days passed, and she continued her careful routine of survival. But she found herself often wandering near the office building where she had seen the man. She did not approach him directly. She simply watched from afar. She noticed how he interacted with his employees, the respect and authority he commanded without raising his voice. She observed small gestures of kindness towards staff who seemed stressed or overworked. It was clear he was wealthy and powerful, yet he did not carry arrogance or cruelty. The girl had never encountered such a person in her life. The contrast with the harshness of her own world was striking. She felt a mix of awe and longing, wondering what it would be like to live a life where fear and hunger did not dictate every action. One evening, as she was resting in a quiet corner of the street, she noticed the man leaving the building. He looked tired, yet there was a calmness in his steps. She instinctively hid behind a small fence, but she realized he had seen her. Instead of ignoring her, he stopped and looked directly in her direction. She froze, unsure if she had been caught doing something wrong. To her surprise, he smiled gently, almost as if acknowledging her presence without judgment. He then continued walking, leaving her both startled and curious. She could not understand why someone like him would even notice her, a poor, silent girl in a city of millions. The encounter left her thinking for days, a small spark of hope igniting in her heart. Her survival days continued, and she found ways to earn small amounts of money, still avoiding attention as much as possible. She helped a few shopkeepers with errands, cleaned some streets for small tips, and traded her skills for food. Yet the memory of the man lingered. She wondered if he would remember her, if he had even noticed her at all. Her quiet mind replayed the brief encounter over and over. In her silent life, small events like this felt monumental, giving her a sense that perhaps the world was not entirely indifferent. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for something better. Weeks later, the opportunity arrived in a way she had not expected. While helping a local shop deliver goods to an office building, she found herself inside the lobby of the very building where she had seen the man. The marble floors gleamed, and the walls were lined with art and polished wood. Everything was unfamiliar, intimidating, yet fascinating. She had never been inside a building like this before, and the contrast with her own life felt almost surreal. She carried the boxers carefully, avoiding eye contact with the staff, trying to blend in and move quietly. But fate had its own plan. The man appeared in the lobby, walking toward her with purpose. This time, she did not hide. He smiled gently, acknowledging her presence. She felt a flutter of nerves and surprise. He spoke to her, asking her name and where she had come from. She hesitated, unsure whether to answer, fearing judgment or disbelief. But something in his calm and kind demeanor encouraged her to speak. She gave a small, quiet response, barely above a whisper. He listened without interruption, his eyes showing interest and concern. It was the first time anyone had listened to her so attentively. She felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He asked her about her situation, how she had come to the city, and what she did to survive. She shared her story in fragments, carefully choosing what to reveal. He did not react with shock or pity. Instead, he nodded, showing understanding and empathy. He offered her a chance to stay in a safe place for the night, and she accepted, hesitant but trusting his intentions. For the first time, she experienced the warmth of safety, a proper meal, and a place to rest without fear. It was a small step, yet it felt monumental in her life, a glimmer of hope she had never known. Over the next few days, the man observed her quietly, noting her intelligence, resilience, and kindness. She helped around his office with small tasks, always quietly, never demanding recognition. Yet her efforts did not go unnoticed. He saw her potential, her ability to adapt, and her unwavering determination despite the hardships she had endured. Slowly, he began to introduce her to new experiences, a proper meal at a restaurant, a ride in a car, a conversation with people who treated her with respect. These experiences were small miracles for her, each one reshaping her understanding of the world and what was possible. She began to trust him gradually, sharing more about her past, her fears, and her dreams. He listened without judgment, offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. For the first time, she felt that someone believed in her, not for what she could do for them, but for who she was. The city, once a place of danger and isolation, started to feel like a place where her life could change. The girl realized that survival was no longer her only goal. She could now think about growth, learning, and perhaps even happiness. One afternoon, he took her to a library, a place she had only dreamed of. Rows of books stretched endlessly, and the quiet atmosphere was almost magical. He encouraged her to read, to explore, and to ask questions. She discovered the joy of learning, the thrill of discovering new ideas, and the power of knowledge. For the first time, she realized that her mind could open doors as much as her courage could. He guided her patiently, never rushing, always respecting her pace. The world outside had been harsh, but here she could dream freely. As the days turned into weeks, the girl grew more confident, more aware of her own worth. She began to speak more, though softly, sharing her thoughts and opinions. She learned that her silence, once a shield, could also be her strength, when paired with careful observation and intelligence. She continued to face challenges, of course, uncertainty about the future, lingering fears from her past, and moments of self-doubt, but she faced them with newfound courage. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, learning, and growing under the guidance of someone who believed in her. The bond between them deepened. It was not romantic, but it was powerful, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared understanding. He saw the girl not as a poor, silent girl, but as a person capable of resilience, compassion, and brilliance. She saw him as a mentor, protector, and guide, someone who opened doors to a world she had never imagined. Their lives, so different in every way, intersected in a way that would change both of them forever. The city, once a place of fear and struggle, had become a place of possibility. The girl had arrived with nothing but courage and hope. She had begun to discover the power of trust, kindness, and knowledge. She realized that her journey was only beginning and that the challenges ahead would test her in new ways. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had someone who believed in her, someone who would support her as she navigated this new life. The encounter with the billionaire CEO was not just chance. It was the turning point that would lead her to a future she had once only dreamed of. A life where her voice, her mind, and her spirit could finally shine. The girl's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Each day, she learned something new, not just about the city, but about herself. She had always been silent, always cautious, but under the quiet guidance of the man who had shown her kindness, she discovered a strength and intelligence that had been hidden beneath fear and survival instincts. She started waking up each morning with a sense of purpose, even though she still carried the memories of hunger and cold nights. Those memories reminded her how far she had come and why she could not give up now. Her days were filled with small tasks, at first helping organize files, delivering messages, and assisting with office errands. She worked quietly, efficiently, and without complaint. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. The man began giving her slightly bigger responsibilities, trusting her to handle them. Each task she completed successfully filled her with pride. It was a feeling she had never known in her old life. Every accomplishment, no matter how small, built her confidence. She realized that she could contribute. She could be seen and valued for her actions, not just her presence. He encouraged her to speak more, to ask questions, and to share her thoughts. At first, she struggled. Speaking had always been dangerous in her past, so she had learned to stay quiet. But he listened patiently, never interrupting or dismissing her. Slowly, she found her voice, starting with simple sentences and short conversations. Each time she spoke, he smiled encouragingly, giving her the courage to continue. She began to understand that her words could be powerful, that her ideas and feelings mattered. It was a new world for her. She embraced it with cautious optimism. He also introduced her to new experiences outside the office. They visited libraries, attended small cultural events, and even walked through parts of the city she had never dared to explore alone. She saw people living different lives, students studying, families laughing together, workers hurrying to and from jobs. She began to imagine a life where she could belong, a life where she could make choices and pursue dreams. Each new experience opened her eyes, showing her that the world was larger and more complex than she had ever known. One day, he handed her a small notebook and told her to write down her thoughts, her ideas, and her dreams. At first she hesitated. Writing had always seemed unnecessary or risky, something that could attract attention or judgment. But he encouraged her gently, reminding her that her mind was valuable and that her thoughts deserved to be recorded. She began to write daily, pouring her fears, hopes, and observations onto the pages. The act of writing became a form of freedom, a way to express herself without fear of being misunderstood. She discovered that her silence had not been emptiness. It had been a preparation for finding her own voice in the right environment. As she grew more confident, she began to notice changes in herself beyond words. She stood taller, walked with more purpose, and looked people in the eye without fear. Her body, once hunched from years of hiding, became stronger and more assured. The skills she had learned on the streets, watchfulness, careful observation, and resilience, began to serve her well in this new environment. She realized that her past, with all its hardships, had prepared her for this moment. The girl who had been invisible was slowly assowing, becoming someone the world could not ignore. He encouraged her to take on bigger challenges, like assisting with decisions in small projects and learning to communicate with people from different backgrounds. She learned to negotiate, to observe reactions, and to understand the subtle dynamics of human interaction. She still felt fear at times, especially when faced with unfamiliar situations. But she learned to pause, think, and respond thoughtfully. Each success, no matter how minor, built her confidence and sense of belonging. She began to feel that she was not just surviving, but thriving. Outside of work, he encouraged her to maintain her independence. He did not shelter her completely, understanding that growth came from facing challenges. She learned to navigate the city with more confidence, finding safe places to rest, earning small amounts of money when necessary, and interacting with people without fear. She still remembered the nights of hunger and cold, the days of loneliness and fear, but those memories became reminders of her resilience, not shackles of despair. She began to see herself as capable, as someone who could overcome obstacles and build a life worth living. The bond between them deepened as trust grew. It was built not on dependence, but on mutual respect and understanding. He valued her insights and perspective, even though she was young and had lived a very different life. She admired his patience, his ability to see beyond appearances, and his dedication to fairness and kindness. Together, they navigated challenges, celebrated small victories, and faced setbacks with patience and determination. She began to feel a sense of family and belonging she had never known before. One day, he introduced her to a mentor, someone who could teach her skills beyond what he could provide. She was hesitant at first, worried that she would not fit in or be taken seriously. But her experiences had taught her resilience, and she embraced the opportunity. She learned about business, communication, and leadership. Each lesson expanded her understanding of the world and her place in it. She realized that knowledge, courage, and kindness could change lives, including her own. Her confidence and skills grew steadily. But she never forgot the girl she had once been, the one who had fled her village, hungry, silent, and alone. She remembered the nights spent hiding in alleys, the moments of despair, and the tiny acts of kindness that had kept her going. Those memories fueled her determination to succeed, not just for herself, but as a reminder that even the smallest, quietest people could make their mark in the world. She began to see her past not as a burden, but as a foundation for the person she was becoming with each passing week. She took on more responsibility, learned more skills, and gained more confidence. She discovered that her intelligence, empathy, and perseverance were assets that could open doors she had never imagined. The city, which had once seemed so intimidating and dangerous, became a place of opportunity. She learned that survival was not just about avoiding danger, but about embracing possibilities, taking risks, and trusting in her own abilities. She began to dream, truly dream, of a life where she could thrive, contribute, and be seen. The man continued to guide her, offering advice, encouragement, and support when needed, but always allowing her to make her own decisions. He understood that true growth came from experience, not hand-holding. She began to understand the value of guidance paired with independence, and she embraced the lessons with humility and determination. Her silence, once a shield, had become a strength, allowing her to observe, learn, and act with careful thought and intention. She was no longer just the poor, silent girl. She was a young woman with potential, courage, and purpose. As time went on, the girl started to contribute meaningfully to the projects she was involved in. She offered ideas, suggested improvements, and helped manage small teams of workers and assistants. Her insights were valued, her dedication recognized. She discovered a sense of pride and fulfillment that she had never known. The man watched her progress with quiet satisfaction. Knowing that she was becoming more than just someone he had helped, she was becoming a force in her own right, capable of making her own decisions and shaping her own future at the same time. She began to help others in small ways, inspired by the kindness she had received. She assisted struggling neighbors, guided other young people who were trying to survive in the city, and shared what she had learned about resilience, courage, and practical skills. Her experiences had taught her empathy and understanding, and she used them to make a positive impact. She realized that her journey was not just about personal growth, but also about lifting others along the way. The girl who had once been invisible was now quietly making a difference, showing that even small acts could have a meaningful impact. By the end of this phase of her journey, she had transformed from a frightened, silent girl into a confident, capable young woman. She had learned to trust, to speak, to act, and to dream. She had discovered her own strength, resilience, and intelligence. And she had begun to apply these qualities in ways that shaped her future. Her bond with the man who had first noticed her had grown into a deep, respectful connection built on trust, guidance, and shared experience. She was no longer defined by poverty or silence. She was defined by courage, determination, and the potential for greatness. The city, which had once seemed overwhelming and hostile, had become a place of growth and opportunity. She had faced countless challenges, yet each one had strengthened her resolve and expanded her understanding of herself and the world. The lessons she had learned, the skills she had developed, and the trust she had built would guide her as she continued her journey. She had discovered that life, even in its harshest forms, could be transformed with courage, kindness, and perseverance. The girl who had fled her village had become someone capable of navigating the complexities of the world. Ready for whatever lay ahead, the girl had come a long way from the frightened, silent child who had fled her village. Each day had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and each challenge had strengthened her resolve. She had survived hunger, fear, and loneliness, and in the process, she had discovered the courage, intelligence, and resilience that had always been inside her. Now, standing on the threshold of a new chapter, she realized that the life she had imagined in her dreams was no longer out of reach. It was becoming real. Her mornings were no longer spent merely surviving. She woke with purpose, eager to learn, grow, and make a difference. She spent her days working with confidence, managing small projects, helping her colleagues, and learning new skills from mentors. Each task she undertook, no matter how small, reminded her that she had value, that her efforts could matter. She had learned the power of observation, patience, and thoughtful action. Her silence, once a shield, had become a tool, allowing her to understand situations deeply before acting. She had grown from a girl who feared the world to someone who navigated it with careful insight. The bond between her and the man who had first noticed her continued to deepen. He treated her not as someone to be pitied, but as a young woman with potential, intelligence, and empathy. He encouraged her to make decisions, take responsibility, and embrace her own power. She trusted him, not blindly, but with the knowledge that he had her best interests at heart. In turn, she inspired him with her courage, determination, and the kindness she showed to others. Their connection was built on mutual respect, guidance, and the shared understanding of challenges and triumphs. It was a bond that shaped her into the confident, capable woman she was becoming. One day the man asked her about her dreams and what she hoped to achieve. She paused, reflecting on how far she had come and what she truly wanted. For the first time, she spoke openly about her desire to help others who had faced the same struggles she had. She wanted to create opportunities for people who were overlooked, to offer guidance, support, and hope. He listened attentively and encouraged her to pursue this vision, assuring her that she had the skills, wisdom, and determination to make it real. The conversation filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. Her days became a balance between learning, working, and preparing for her future mission. She studied diligently, gaining knowledge in areas she had never imagined exploring. She learned about leadership, communication, and organization. She began mentoring younger people in small ways, teaching them skills for survival, resilience, and self-confidence. Each small success reinforced her belief that she could make a meaningful impact. Her life, once defined by struggle and silence, was now defined by action, growth, and purpose. As she gained confidence, she began to explore the city more freely. She met people from different walks of life. Learning from their experiences and stories, she understood that each person carried their own burdens and dreams, and she approached them with empathy and respect. Her quiet presence became a source of comfort to those around her. People began to notice her kindness, intelligence, and dedication. Slowly, she was no longer invisible. Her life was becoming a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of opportunity. One evening, she walked through the park where she had first found a moment of peace after arriving in the city. She reflected on her journey, the hunger, the fear, the long nights of uncertainty, and the small moments of kindness that had guided her along the way. She thought about the man who had believed in her when no one else did, and the mentors and friends who had helped her grow. Tears came to her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She had made it through hardships she never thought she could endure, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace her future. With the support and guidance of the man who had changed her life, she began to implement her vision. She worked with small groups of young people, teaching them skills for survival, education, and personal growth. She helped them understand that their past did not define their future, and that even the smallest efforts could lead to meaningful change. Her own experiences gave her credibility and empathy, allowing her to connect deeply with those she helped. She felt a sense of fulfillment and joy that she had never known. Realizing that helping others was a way to honor the struggles she had overcome, her life continued to evolve. And with each passing day, she became more confident in her abilities and her purpose. She spoke with assurance, acted decisively, and carried herself with quiet strength. She was no longer the silent, invisible girl who had fled her village in fear. She had become a young woman capable of navigating complex challenges, building relationships, and inspiring others. Her journey had transformed her, showing her that courage, kindness, and perseverance could open doors to a life beyond survival. The city, which had once been intimidating and dangerous, had become a place of opportunity and growth. She had learned to navigate its streets, its challenges, and its people. She had discovered that resilience and intelligence could overcome fear and adversity. She had found mentors, allies, and friends who believed in her potential. And most importantly, she had found her own voice, using it to guide, teach, and inspire. In the quiet moments, she reflected on her past with clarity and compassion. She forgave those who had misunderstood or mistreated her, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because she no longer wanted her heart to be weighed down by bitterness. She understood that her journey was not about revenge or resentment, but about growth, learning, and creating a meaningful life. Her past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was free to create the life she wanted, guided by courage, wisdom, and compassion. The man who had first helped her continued to support her, but he allowed her to take the lead in her projects and initiatives. He recognized that she had grown beyond the need for constant guidance, and that her own experiences and insights were valuable. Their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect and admiration. She inspired him as much as he inspired her, showing that true mentorship could transform lives when built on trust, patience, and understanding. The girl, now a young woman, looked forward to the future with hope and determination. She knew there would still be challenges, setbacks, and obstacles, but she had the tools, knowledge, and resilience to face them. She understood that life was not easy, but she also knew that she could create opportunities, make a difference, and lead a life of purpose. Her silence, courage, and intelligence had carried her from despair to empowerment. and she was ready to embrace every possibility in the final reflection of her journey. She realized that her escape from the village had not just saved her life, it had transformed it. She had moved from fear to courage, from silence to voice, from invisibility to influence. She had discovered the power of resilience, the importance of trust, and the beauty of kindness. Her life was no longer defined by poverty or fear, but by purpose, growth, and the ability to impact the world around her. She had become a living example of hope, showing that even the quietest, most overlooked people could rise above circumstances and create a meaningful, empowered life. As she walked through the city streets, now familiar and welcoming, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and fulfillment. She remembered every challenge, every act of kindness, and every lesson learned along the way. She knew that her journey was ongoing. There would always be more to learn and achieve, but she faced the future with confidence. She had discovered her strength, her voice, and her purpose. The poor, silent girl who had once escaped into the unknown had become a young woman ready to embrace life fully, to help others, and to create a future filled with hope, courage, and possibility.